Oh, why haven't we heard that before? Why nobody
I know, it's
ever thought of that?
well, Mr. Dennis. Good evening to you.
Hello. Hello to you, young Eric.
Hello.
Eric.
How are you doing this evening?
I don't know. I feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
You sound very Austrian.
I'm from California.
Ah.
It was a long time ago.
Are you the governor?
No, I don't speak English. You went into an English pattern there. No. Didn't you? You fell into it.
I mean...
Do you Irish?
Irish? I
think so.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. You'll never get it right. You're just a shite.
I need some more Jameson.
I said to be dull-witted. That went into upper crust English. You appear to be a bit dull-witted. Oh, darling, don't say that to the boy. Don't say that to the boy, darling. You would crush his spirit. I loved in Bohemian Rhapsody when at the press conference, Malik did this so fabulous, and they said to Freddie Mercury, said, "Now that you go this morning, you go fix your teeth." and Freddie Mercury says, "No, we're in England. I don't want to stand out."
Yep, that's a good moment.
Freddie, your teeth. Why don't you get your teeth fixed?
I live in Britain. I don't want to stand out.
Just as if he had heard it, and it flashes back to his self-appointed tryout for the band, the Smile band. What was the name of it? The Smile, was it?
I don't know what the name of the band was.
Smile, with the big.
But they said, and in that comeback, he said, "Yeah, I've got extra incisors, and apparently
they had a wider range."
Apparently that made him a better singer, and that he was always worried about fixing the teeth because he was worried that it would mess up his
Boy, I'll tell you.
However, I did read an article where there was somebody did a scientific study, like proper academics, that disproved the myth. Apparently, there's this myth that Freddie could sing in 4 octaves, which is just a total. No one can do that.
Neither could he.
And apparently neither could he. But he with his falsetto he could mimic.
And why wouldn't the falsetto count in his vocal repertoire as allowable under these? Do you know?
It depends on how you define singing. I mean, I think it's a different vibration.
Gotta keep those good vibrations happening with you. What episode was that? Gotta keep your best edited ending. It's the only podcast that I've ever listened to for more than about 30 seconds just to hear that ending that you did. It was
right.
And the singing
with the crickets,
and then the crickets.
You nailed the tempo. You nailed the tempo and the pitch. Yeah, which that's the thing that I have no capability of doing.
Right. Well, that's how all my music is by ear. I had. When I was in the choir at the Presbyterian Church, because I couldn't read music, but because I have a good ear, the choir master, a brilliant young man and funny, had me stand next to the best tenor, who was classical type tenor, but also had studied music for I don't know how long. He was a very successful businessman. His name was Doug, and he was a great guy on top of it, But because of my ear, what Doug said to me after about the second rehearsal, he said, "It's amazing to me how you are with me entirely, but you are the smallest of split seconds behind me. And it's unnerving because I'm hearing you echo me." And I had never, of course, that's what I do, is I hear it. Right. But obviously his ear is so sensitive that split second of hearing it and singing it, which means, of course, that there is some delay, although I pick it up within the rhythm. It's not like he ends a note and I'm on the other note. I mean, we're doing it together.
Right.
But he's just a split second ahead of me, apparently. But he helped teach me, I'll have to remember the name of it. Maybe you put it in the Post-it notes, but it's like an old tune that is in French. and it's about the congregation rising up and supporting the singer who has gone through whatever human tragedy, but it's a tribute to the congregation and how they helped him through this, which was what had happened to me through the hard times about. But the joyous, celebratory, and my deep felt feeling to thank them propelled me to learn the entire fucking thing in French without really being able to read a lick of music. If I was reading the music along with Doug, singing it along with the choir master helping me, then I can see and read. I can hear the music. I can feel the music in the note that I'm looking at on paper. But so, and that helped me eventually with tempo. When a particular note was a very quick note, I could see that on the written music and knew that it was coming up and it was just a quick hit. But a lot of fun to dig into all that voice as an instrument kind of thing.
Yeah, that's really fascinating that some people just have that ability. I imagine some of it can be learned, but a lot of it is just either you have it or you don't. And people like me that rarely go to church, we're all familiar with the singing a half a beat behind the rest of the congregation, of figuring out whatever the hymn is, because you can just sort of do that. There's a phenomenon where hearing yourself echoed back to you, like if you've ever been on a conference call and the audio has a delay, and you can hear whatever you just said right back to you.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. And they I think I'll look this up and put it in the show notes at happyhour.fm/021, because we're on the Blackjack episode. There's this, I think it was MIT did this, they created this thing. It was this sort of this audio gun that you could point. It was a microphone and a speaker, and you could point it at someone. And what it would do is listen to what they were saying and reflect their speech back to them like a half a second later, or even less, just a quarter of a second later. And they called it the gun that will make anyone shut up, because
you can't stand
because it is impossible. It is impossible to keep talking when you can hear yourself echoed in a split second behind you.
That is crazy. Anyone
that's ever been on one of those conference calls knows that feeling, because you cannot make a coherent sentence. Or if you're on this podcast, it's also hard to make sense.
Back in the day, I may have mentioned, when I was in grade school, I was a soprano. And one thing that I was able to do in my soprano years was to be able to carry forward with me a very unique whistle that I can still do, but now it's matured, because it started as a soprano note, but ends up in a baritone. I can occasionally do bass with this whistle.
How does whistle range relate to vocal range? Is it pretty similar?
Oh, it's
because it's all about the volume of your throat and mouth, I guess.
The ability to use the volume to be able to achieve your notes. The volume or the hollow.
The space, yeah. I'm using volume, and it's hard to talk about sound and use the word volume to mean physical space. But yes,
But you're right. The spatial volume would be.
So, are you going to perform for us now?
Well, it's not. It just takes. Well. Oh. So
that's impressive. I'm going to enjoy that waveform when I'm editing.
Have you ever heard anything more real? I mean,
that is the truest.
And it's a skill I've had.
I mean,
I meant
people are going to call this fake news, but
no. They just heard it.
I witnessed that with my own ears.
Well, you can see me.
And so did our listeners. Yes.
What? In spite of them?
Dennis was.
In spite of them.
No.
Those bastard listeners. Why are you mad at them now? What do they do? Oh, I know. They put his 550th in a Uruguay Comedic poll, but out of 1,000. Remember, we were 849 once.
Well, I mean, we're making our way up.
Progress. Now, I want to know how we're doing in Nicaragua.
Soon we're going to be.
If Uruguay, as you would say it in your distorted way, we're 550th in Nicaragua. We're at least 420. Nicaragua.
Nicaragua?
How do you pronounce it?
Okay.
Nicaragua.
Nicaragua?
Nope. Sorry. You have to look it up. Put it in the show notes. I know I'm right.
I guess in Spanish it would be Nicaragua.
Nicaragua.
But
what's the Spanish term for taking a holiday, particularly from your wife?
de Rodriguez.
De Rodriguez.
Yes.
The thing I like about that the most is the ending, the TH instead of the Z. De Rodriguez.
That's a
little spittle.
That's
the little spittle forms. I feel so Spanish when that happens.
That's the thing. Whenever I try and talk, whenever I go to America and I'm in a Mexican restaurant and I want to order number 13 on the menu and I say trece, they're like, "Oh, that's a different Spanish." So
you say what?
I say trece, and then they would say trece.
Oh, you say what?
That they're for 13.
And you say what?
Trece.
You say what? Say it slower.
Trece.
Trefe.
Tre.
Trefe.
Fe.
Oh, trefe.
Trefe. Because
you're doing the tongue against the two teeth and trefe instead of the lips. Trefe. Trefe.
Yeah.
And what do they say?
Trece.
Trece.
They don't lisp on the S sound
because they're Americanized.
No, just the South Americans don't talk the same way that Spaniards do.
Are they lazier?
I don't know. I mean, according to the president, they're all rapists. So,
well,
who knows?
And there's 42% of American people supporting the president. So what does that tell you about this country?
Exactly.
What does it tell you about this country? 42% of what? 42% of the people they poll, 42% of the people who are pollable.
Right, of the people that will answer their landline.
So these numbers are all suspect to begin with, but this one, doesn't matter how suspect it is, anything that's in that range. So what's in the cup?
A little bit of gin, a little bit of tonic.
Tonic?
Yep.
I'm drinking Don Killian's. Here it is.
Imagine that, amber.
There's a lot to say about amber beer.
I always like that line in Piano Man where he says, making love to his tonic and gin.
Yeah. Is that what you do?
Flipping that around.
Stick your dick in a glass?
I mean, not on camera. And it's pretty cold with ice.
No, because you're only showing the chest above, which to my dismay, you were bare chested. Don't ever do that again. I have fucking nightmares about that episode. I don't know why. It's probably all those crazy tattoos you have that look like the little scurrying devils in the what's that crazy painting that they painted the 8 rings of hell. Is that
Dante's Inferno?
No, not Dante. Well, this painter painted about Dante's Inferno, perhaps, but I have his painting. I should one of them, a poster. I should go get it.
Not Picasso. Picasso's scary one was
that's fucking scary, man. I mean, that dude was like on a perpetual acid trip. I mean, everything he looked at was like fucking squares and triangles and shit. I mean, that was like, whoa, dude, whoa, and the colors are like, whoa.
Well,
some of these painters too, like, Picasso. Right, who was crazy on top of it, which helps explain not Picasso, but
you're thinking of Salvador Dalí.
No, he wasn't.
That's crazy. The one I'm thinking of. Have you seen Dalí's work?
Yes, but I don't know that the man was crazy. The man was exceedingly eccentric, but he didn't cut off his ear.
Man,
so near.
Oh, you're talking about Van Gogh.
Van Gogh is who I meant. What did I say? I said somebody else. But anyway, yeah, Van Gogh was.
I was talking about Picasso again.
Picasso is like.
Oh yeah,
right? That's just.
Well, and poor Van Gogh. Poor Van Gogh got no recognition as a painter in his lifetime.
He painted till he fucking died.
And now he's considered one of the best. That's what's going to happen with this podcast. Is after we die, this is going to be
right. It'll be long after we're dead, which for me could be soon.
Well, I mean, if you keep hitting those ambers, this is going to become just vivid.
What was that? What did you say?
What
about my ambers? What did you say about my ambers?
I mean,
would you try to slide in there about my ambers?
If you keep having 25 amber beers every evening, then
25 every evening? Are you kidding me? What do you think? I'm a fucking camel? That the hump is full of fucking beer?
You're an amber camel.
Yeah, that camel that commercial where the camel's going around saying, "What day is it? What day is it?" It's Wednesday, right? Over the hump day.
Uh-huh.
You seen that commercial?
No.
You need to link it. It's hilarious.
I don't see commercials, but yes.
All right. Camels.
That'll be in the show notes.
Padding through a small office space saying, "Hey, what day is it? Hey, what's today? Hey, what day is it?" To everybody, they're like rolling their eyes. It's very fun.
Uh-huh.
As you can tell from just my rendition of it. And
guess what day it is? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
It's hilarious.
I tell you what, before the show starts, you'd have 2 of those drinks. The more you drink, the funnier I am. So remember that. Remember that, Mr. Solemn Face, Mr. Poopy Pants.
It only happened like 4 times.
On the air last week. Why don't you define it for our listeners who aren't puking already at the thought of your shitty diaper? But at least you're wearing those big diapers anymore. And I asked you whether you wore them or whether you didn't wear them anymore, and you said it all depends, which I thought was quixotic, or as others would say, chaotic. How would you say it?
I would either say Quixotic or Quixotic.
Really?
Huh.
That's weird.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce Don Quixote's name?
Well, I'm in Spain. It's Don Quixote.
Don Quixote. So if it's a Don Quixote, then why would you not pronounce that word Quixote?
Oh,
quixotic. It'd be quixotic.
I don't know how to. I don't know the adjective, and
that's where it's derivative of.
In Spanish, I guess the adjective might be Quixotico. I don't know.
Quixotico.
I'll have to.
Quixotico.
Well, I've always maintained that if I ever had a donkey, I would name him Jote.
Jote.
So he would be Donkey Jote.
Donkey Jote. That's good.
Yeah, I thought so.
That would be quixotic. Quixotic.
Quixotic. Well, this is some good material.
I'm sure this is all fascinating. This will hit the editing room floor. It's fine. It's fine with me. We just go where we go. There's no cure for it. So I thought of something that we could do. So we would start posting near public notices what we think really needs to be said. So the one that I thought of the other day, and I can't remember it all because it was on the spot, but it was in the shower of the Y, and there's a sign on the wall that says you must shower before using the pool. So I want to get a board and write the message that I really want to tell people, and then put it on the wall, and then somehow film people reading.
In the shower, good.
Although it's in the shower. So I don't know, but maybe I don't know how that would work. But the note would say, and we mean this, you slime ball. Don't just stand under the water and get your hair wet and then get in the hot tub. Actually use soap. When you get in the hot tub, before you get in the hot tub, and preferably before you shower, please take a piss. Because I know what you're going to do if you don't is the first thing you're going to do in the hot tub that I'm going to sit in next is you're going to piss. Mm-hmm. So you sloppy pig, piss, then shower using soap, and then get into the community hot tub. Do you get it? That's what we post.
It's a long time.
We got to put it up though.
Right.
Well, if they're taking a shower, we want them to take a while.
Right.
But that's an example of what I mean. So it's almost like a little rant. Where you or I in this case might say, it pisses me off the way that people don't take showers before they get into hot.
Sure.
Blah, blah, blah.
It clearly pisses you off.
Well, and I know you're with me on this.
So what's your understanding of the motivation for the shower before you get in the pool? Is it to, and in the current state where they don't enforce any soap, is it just to generally wash off dust and grime? Or is it?
The goal is to reduce as much as possible the amount of dirt that gets carried into the hot tub.
Right.
The amount of dead skin would be included there. The amount of scabies or scabs about to fall off. I mean, you should really shower well before you get in. And if you have open wounds, don't get in. That would be the other sign. And it would say, and by the way, you motherfuckers with open wounds, don't you think about getting into our hot tub. We know you want to recover, and we know you've had some kind of an accident, even to the extent of perhaps a scraping motorcycle accident. Don't get in the hot tub with open wounds or with scabs that might somehow become waterlogged and fall off into the swirling waters. No, you stop. We should have police there. We should have a hot tub policeman.
Like a guy with
you could do it
with an assault rifle standing there.
Well, no, hey, I don't think we got to get crazy. Just a gaff hook.
Right. Well, as we discussed in the previous episode.
Not for the fish, but
right for they're in the water. Also included with the open wounds is the, you don't want people with a bunch of Band-Aids getting in there.
Oh yeah. You find a Band-Aid in there, in the water, and you just get out.
Right.
So I got to tell you a story. Did I tell you this already about the guy in the hot tub who I accidentally touched? I get in the hot tub, and it's after one of our podcasts, and I get in the hot tub, and he has moved. He's the only other person in there, and he's moved from a corner to kind of a middle one. There's 4 corners, and there's only 2 middle ones on the long side. But the way that he's positioned himself toward the jet, he's kind of partly in the corner, but not very much. So I grab the corner, which is the best corner, the close corner, and unbeknownst to me, the way that he's in the water is that a part of his body is actually all the way over toward me, although you couldn't see that because it's below the water. And so my foot touches his foot, and he doesn't much glance at me. He just moves a little bit more to the left. So I get comfortable.
As is reasonable.
Yeah, and of course, and it was just perfectly fine. But then as I relaxed and laid down in the water a little bit, where his new position was, his right leg apparently was splayed all the way out. So it was still, a leg is long.
Yes.
I mean, it's 3 feet long, right?
Sure.
So he's 3 feet underwater, closer to me than I knew. And so for the second time, I just touched his foot. I didn't kick it. I didn't hurt it.
Right.
I just touched it. And he gave me this look, right? And literally spun in the water to give me a look, and then stormed out of the hot tub with a huff and grabbed his towel and marched out the door, leaving me alone in the hot tub chuckling about what possibly could have been going on with this man, that he was so irritated that apparently I did, in fact, make a move twice. Maybe that is irritating. I certainly, in hindsight, I realized that I could have just simply taken another corner, but that is, after all, my corner, and I'm there every night. I lay claim to it to a certain extent. But I was thinking about running into him in the health club, right? And what I'd say to him.
Are you going to like wink at him and be like, "Hey, man"?
No. I'd say, boy, that hot tub sure is relaxing, isn't it? That's one thing. The other one would say, just to stop drying my hair or something, and say, "Hey man, you all right? I mean, you okay? I'm worried about you. I mean, you okay?" Another one would be to go in and sit down on the stool next to him and take my bathing suit off, and then look up at him with big sad eyes and say hello. He'd run.
Or ask him, "Hey, you want to get back in the hot tub?"
Oh, okay. Hey man, you're pretty nimble. I like that. How about climbing back in that hot tub with me? I mean, I if somebody did that to me in a hot tub, I think I'd just be very polite and gracious. Oh, it's all right. If I didn't like it, grab their foot and yank them underwater.
One thing is the second time, and another thing is the 7th time, where you reposition yourself and the other person manages to find you. But
it was only question.
So I think you're in the clear. I think he's in the wrong. You're clearly in the right. That's a good hot tub story. I know, right?
So that expression you just used, right? That expression can be traced to a very specific point in time, like all expressions, right? Or a particular article,
sure,
or the first one who's quoted it. But I remember these. There's these women that I know who live in the New York City area, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, etc. Work in and out of different boroughs there, and they're things like that, which is a speech pattern, or I don't know what.
Sure.
What's it called when that thing that happens when people do that, right? Whatever it is, you'll remember. Yeah,
we'll say speech pattern. Yeah,
right.
A phrase.
They were always. I knew ahead of the curve because it was coming from there. So I would hear something from them that I would be able to understand was going to be something that soon I'd hear from everybody. Another one that I heard was you're saying something to somebody and they say, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right. And when I heard this woman say this, I thought, I've never heard this before, and I know that soon I'm going to hear a lot of people say, and damn if it wasn't true.
Well, I listen to a one of the podcasts that I really like is called Lexicon Valley by Slate.com. It'll be in the show notes. And it's all about the science of words and how language changes. And the host has written a bunch of different books about how language changes. And one of the very consistent things that is seen throughout history is every new expression. You picked up on it perfectly. Every new expression comes from women. Men don't invent new ways of talking. It's always women, which is, it's one of those weird imbalances in human life. And one of the things that they do in that show is they will look back, they will play, to the extent that, we have recordings from 100 years ago, they will play recordings of the way people used to talk 100 or 50 years ago, talk about how that has changed and why it has changed, and how linguists have understand the standard progression of how language changes, and how, so they can sort of predict that if we're saying, now, then in a few years we might be saying or something like that. That's just a contrived example that I came up with, but they know the way that the words change in that way.
It's funny that you say that, because I had an experience last night, in fact, that I was going to mention, which was I was watching the movie Deadwood, and I'm a big fan of the series. And in fact, when I was going through physical therapy for one of my many historical ailments, I think my frozen right shoulder, where I could watch all of them in like 3 days, every one of the seasons. I think 3 seasons, perhaps, maybe 21 episodes, whatever, but a fascinating series.
I've heard it's very good.
Amazing stuff. But they did a movie recently, this past year. And in the movie, the language in it is very formal and somewhat stilted, but parsed with so much foul language on top of it that it's this fascinating juxtaposition in the movie of what everybody talked, which was more formal, but what the so-called, with the higher-ups or the hoity-toities would say with the riffraff, mixing it with their lexicon of every other phrase was that dirty cocksucker, or fuck this, right? But the formal language, where in what I think his name is Ian McShane, I think is the lead character. You're gonna have to check this and edit it correctly, so I'm saying it right. But
I won't.
He says to the senator, "Is brevity in your repertoire?" and that came up. But here's the scene that I want you to link to the show notes, and it is that this female character played by a woman, I want to say Polly something. She's very good, and she's been in many movies. She's quite an actress. She gets off the train and she runs into an old friend, and he offers her to carry her and her adopted niece or daughter to where they were going. And she looks at him and she says, "Yes, I would be ever grateful for the transport, but it pales in how delightful it would be to have your company."
Hey, I'd be happy to convey y'all into Deadwood camp in my wagon.
As we would be for the transport and your good company.
Oh, well, come on.
And she says it in just the most,
posh,
common conversational way that you can understand how that language, that formality, which was stilted in one sense, and for her to display it with just the right lightness and whatnot, but then have it. Where some of the other actors, it seemed a bit tedious for them, perhaps, that the language was that way, and some found it just the more I liked the character was somewhat related to how well they did with that formal banter mixed with that underlying riff-raffy current of vulgarity. But I was thinking about, as you were mentioning, the linguist, what a linguist would say about all that, and how.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it was Deadwood, South Dakota, back before it was a state, and then the movie is when they became a state. It's actually quite good, and we're seeing some of the performances are unbelievable.
So are they just like, "Well, I do say so. You may go fuck yourself"? Is it stuff like that?
No. Nope.
Is it that sort of mixture?
It's, first of all, it's American. It's an American accent, not British at all.
Well,
and it's not. But your point being that is it that pattern where they put the vulgarity within the pattern of the formal language? No, they don't. They talk the formal language, and then kind of
there's two languages, right?
It's but then they pepper it where he might have said, is brevity in your repertoire? And then the guy, comes back and says something brief. And in this case, he was wanting his support to try to, buy this land from Charlie. And the guy would say, the McShane's character, the lead character, he's quite a long name, Stewart's son, I think. He comes back and he says, wow, you are amazingly forthright and pithy in that remark. But need I remind you that my general feeling for you is that you should go fuck yourself, right? Because this guy cut his finger off, among other things. So to some extent, yes, I think built into it, but more, as he's walking away or talking to a bartender, they may say, well, what did he have to say? And the response would be, what else would a cocksucker say that would come out of his mouth other than a bunch of, of jism or whatever? I mean, whatever. Very vulgar. But the formality of it is really interesting, because it makes you really have to listen, to what the characters are saying.
Right. There have been several shows, but I recall back when I was in college, I guess, there was this teen drama show called Dawson's Creek that where a lot of people, a lot of famous people got their start. Those actors all went on to be important in Hollywood, but the way it was this show where it was teenagers, but they talked like really posh adults. Like, they used just these enormous words. And I recall, even at the time, I thought, this is a bizarre show where they're using, it's like they're your average teenagers, but they're using these amazing words, and never once did they say, well, like, it was all just, well, I do declare that I think you should go out with me.
That was a very good quote.
But it was,
you might want to put something in the show that's a little bit more truthful or believable. That was a bad quote. No, you should have written something about that.
Setting myself up like this, I'm such an idiot.
Dude, listen to me. Look, you were phenomenal out there tonight. Don't let these inbred idiots get you down. If you leave now, you're never going to forgive yourself.
Look, I don't belong here, Dawson. I mean, look at me. I mean, how could I have stooped this low for money? I might as well have just sold myself on a street corner.
George, you realize you could win this thing?
But what's interesting about that is that that's a thing that my children express. And I think my father was the first to notice this. He said, your children speak adult English, because my children don't have any contact with other English speaking children, right? They only talk to me and my wife. And so it's not uncommon for, my 6-year-old to say, well, actually, what if we decided to not go there, but the alternative is we could do this? And that's a thing that your average 6-year-old in America is not going to talk like that. Right. And they don't talk like that in Spanish, because they talk like a Spanish child would. But because they only know adult English, and they don't have any of the shortcuts or whatever that are taken in English by children.
Right. Aaron is like that.
Really?
He would go up to adults when he was like 3 years old and put out his hand and say, hello, my name is Aaron. What's your name? And they'd be like, well, hello, little man. And then he'd just say, what's your name? And then he'd say, do you want to go play? And, I remember John White, first time he met him, he said, well, sure. He took him by the hand and put him in the room. But that's that. And there's this other boy we know who's married to our nephew. We love her, and her nephew is like that, and very, very ahead of his speech patterns, way ahead of his age. And when he was really young, we'd say something to him, and he'd say, well, actually, the fact is that, blah, 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 blah. And then say, and it's often been said that blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And you look at him and say, are you 5?
Pardon me for contradicting you, but yeah. Is that a...
Right. And then the well actually was that where you might say something, light-spirited around the campfire or whatever, that was, maybe half truth, half fiction. He would opine, and say, well, actually...
You would say something like that?
Huh?
That you would say something half truth and half fiction around the campfire? That seems...
I know. It's hard to believe
I imagine you could simulate that because your kids were homeschooled, at least from a young age. And I imagine that would greatly contribute to that, where they're not in direct contact with other kids their age.
Or in this case,
the kids know
case too. Yes, that's part of it. But it was more than that. This was more, he was born with it rather than learned it. This was a old soul in an older soul in a younger station.
If you've enjoyed what you just heard, you can support us by telling a friend or sharing us on social media. Monthly donations to help us pay for hosting and editing can be provided at patreon.com/happyhour. That's all one word, happy hour. All our episodes, including show notes for each episode, are available on our website, happyhour.fm. You can tweet at us at happyhour.fm. That's with the dot spelled out, happyhour.dotfm. Or we can receive email at the same name, happyhourdotfm@gmail.com. It would also be great if you could give us a positive rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. That really helps other people find us. See you next week.